right, this is the Dales Report. Shad Dales here. Happy to be joined this morning in beautiful Miami, Dr. Roger McIntyre, CEO of Braxia Scientific. How are things?
Shad, how can anything other than be great here in South Florida? Amazing. Great to be with you.
I see you got the same tan line as obviously me, us Canadians down here in Miami, huh?
Yeah, it's called the Casper, the tan.
Too funny. So you got down here to Miami. Obviously, we're here at Wonderland. Big conference. This is the industry's biggest conference since the industry's launched. Let's find out a little about you, though. Doctor, 25 years in the pharma industry. First question, what got you interested in this space?
Hope. Needing new innovation, Shad. I've been in the business 25 years, over 100,000 people with depression I've seen in my career through my clinic. And people have spoken to me loud and clear. Said, look, treatments are not good enough. You got to do better. Can you help us? And that's a call to action for me. And also in that time frame, Shad, not only do we have this perspective of seeing people suffering, but also I spent 25 years in drug discovery and development in this broad space of depression and stress-related conditions. And we reached a point. Now we got to go a different direction. Psychedelics presented itself, and we were the first in Canada ever to provide this in the community for people with depression in a way that's in accordance with best practices. So it's a broader imperative, Shad. We want to deal with this scourge of depression-related illnesses, but we want to do it in a way that's thoughtful, a way that's guided by the market, and a way that's guided by best practices, and all those vectors have to line up.
So how do you think you do that?
Well, we do it several ways. First of all, you have to have the bona fides. 25 years, I've got an amazing team. Shad, I learned a long time ago, you surround yourself with the greatest people. I got a great team who work on the clinical implementation side, on the R&D side. Secondly, you also have to have those strategic relationships. And strategy with respect to the healthcare, Shad, is not only having relationships in the scientific world, that's obviously important, but we've got 25 years of relationships that are robust with industry, the mainstream pharmaceutical industry.
Right?
It's critical, absolutely critical. And they're interested in this area. CNS, or central nervous system therapeutics, is a big space, multi-billion-dollar space. The appetite is there for innovation that has a line of sight. It can't be pie in the sky. It's got to be near term, and it's got to be implementable in care. You got to have a real world implementation plan. One other comment around that, Chad. Just recently, we've published the world's first ever clinical practice guideline for a psychedelic in the American Journal of Psychiatry. And we did that because we, as a company, Braxia Scientific, we in fact want to be a strong business. We are a strong business based on the fundamentals of reality-based R&D with implementation, as well as in fact having those relationships. And we want to lead the world in this area through the guardrails of best practices. It's got to be done according to best practices, because the psychedelic space, Shad, needs several aspects. Good R&D, good leadership, good relationships, and the appropriate guardrails put in place.
So what do you think? You know, you talk about the importance of having connections, relationships with health officials. I hear that from a lot of companies within the space. So how do you, like, if you're a new investor to the space, what does that mean as far as having the right, obviously, connections? What does that translate into later on down the road? And how does one believe or actually see reality versus, say, somebody that's, you know, say they're doing it, but not necessarily doing it? Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And this is a critical point. What I'm so thrilled about this area, Shad, is that I have not seen this type of enthusiasm. I've not seen animal spirits like this in psychiatry, frankly, my entire tenure in this business. It is frankly awesome to see. But, ambition and spirits is not enough. You got to, in fact, have a thoughtful direction. And I would say you also need to have a runway. You need to be able to do this. Look, we've just gone through this terrible pandemic, COVID-19.
I know.
Would you buy an mRNA vaccine from someone who's ever developed one before? Of course not. The same logic applies. It's common sense. You want to, in fact, work with companies that have that bona fide. So we are, in fact, interested in two specific areas, Shad. Job number one, get these treatments available under the umbrella of best practices at high scale in a profitable way. Secondly, what we also want to do is provide assets, that is, assets that can make it to the clinic, in the real world clinics in the near term. And there is, in fact, not a mysterious line of sight. There's a very clear line of sight how that's done, and it's done through the partnerships with pharma, and also it requires a, frankly, track record to be able to do this. So I think if I'm an investor, you look at what's in this space. This clearly is a big space. It's a very fast-moving, hyperkinetic space.
Absolutely.
But it's a space that I think that investors should be encouraged to find out where are those bona fides, where's the strategic relationships, and where in fact has there been frankly the track record. Our company, myself, I've been named the top researcher in the world in depression research in over 20 years. I'm not a self-congratulatory type, but I want to use that frankly gift to really direct our company forward, and that's what we're doing.
It's good for you.
Yeah.
Accessibility. I know that you and I have talked about this off camera a little bit. Being a pharma executive, obviously that's a big concern with people, making sure they have accessibility to a lot of these medicines, if and when they actually do come to fruition, the cost, if that's available. You guys are actually implementing a strategy that takes place where it is accessible. You want to elaborate further on that?
Absolutely. So we talk about different forms of capitalism. What we're doing at Braxia is the ultimate stakeholder capitalism, because we're addressing the issue of really depression and suicide and stress-related illnesses. And what I've learned, Chad, here we are in beautiful, the Sunshine State, Florida. I've worked for the last 6-7 years with Medicaid here in the state of Florida. Okay. And what they have taught me very, very clearly is that any new treatments that come to market have got to have a viable, this is the land of Walt Disney World. It can't be a Walt Disney World plan. It's got to be a viable plan to implement the treatment. In other words, how are these drugs developed? Because how they're developed is how they're going to be implemented.
Right.
And so the reimbursement in the public and private sector affects the access, but also affects the value proposition on the products in the business case. So at Braxia Scientific, what we're doing is not R&D, we're doing R&D and I, research, development, and implementation. In other words, you want a way to make these treatments available to every citizen of our community, so they can actually have access to the treatment so it can help them. And I think it would do nobody a service to develop a psychedelic broadly for depression or some related condition that the person cannot access because the wraparounds required are just not really feasible.
So I want to elaborate on that. Like, what do you think right now, the industry, let's face it, we all want to be supportive in the growth. What are we doing right, but also what are some of the concerns that we're doing wrong right now?
I think what's been right is the belief that we should be going in a different direction. In other words, we've had this era of drugs and psychiatry, frankly, Shad, for 7 decades, approaching 70 years now. And as they say, it's time to move on. And I think the field has celebrated that. There's been obviously very significant and large investors in this area who see that line of sight. Big Pharma sees that line of sight. And frankly, the FDA sees that line of sight. The FDA has declared many of these products break through. So the stars have lined up. But what everyone agrees on, who's sort of, who's been in this space a long time, is you need to in fact do this in a way that is has concordance with best practices. And I would say that what's done right is this is the time to move forward. But where I see room for improvement, and I hope we're going to see it, and I think Braxia, is an exemplar of this, is that you need to in fact develop treatments with 2 things in mind. Does it have the scientific integrity? And secondly, does it have a viable implementation strategy?
Right.
And I keep coming back to that because if I had a new pill today for depression, and it required wraparound for implementation that no one's going to pay for, no one can access, that isn't going to happen.
Right.
So we need to think about not just the conventional medical model, that is the brick and mortar clinics, but look what happened during COVID. Telehealth, e-health, m-health skyrocketed. And it wasn't just the utilization, it was the confidence and the reimbursement in that particular interface. So Braxia is in the business of making these treatments accessible through disparate portals, not just brick and mortar, but also through technology, but also developing R&D with our partnerships with industry and also our partnerships, frankly, in the advocacy space as well, to help provide input as to what are the key outputs we should be looking for in our development.
So, pretty passionate to say the least. When I look at your background, the industry as a whole excites you a lot, I would assume.
Well, what excites me is that, this has been a surreal journey for me. People have been affected so badly for depression. I've seen so much suffering.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it's been agonizing to watch. It must come to an end. It can come to an end. And, this is, I'm excited because I see the line of sight. I see the team around me. And I'm thrilled. I think we just need to make sure we just stay focused, which we're going to do. We've got strong fundamentals in the company. And I think that we have 2 simultaneous objectives that I think are going to really head on address the imperative of depression and all its nasty cousins, and also get new treatments that are going to transform this area.
Well, 2 weeks ago I was interviewing a CEO and he said, look, SSRIs actually were a great invention back in the mid-80s.
Yep.
It's 40 years ago now,
You
right?
bet.
World's changed.
It
We need
sure
alternative
has.
sleep. I've even spoke to a couple of doctors, and they're like, look, the idea of getting into psychedelics wasn't the reason why we got in. We just
Right.
needed alternative solutions for our military veterans.
Absolutely.
And this is where the data obviously comes in. It's very promising in the early stages, so it's anxious to see, and it's been a great event. Last thing I wanted to touch on, I know we talk about other companies in drug development, the timeline, it does take quite some time, and people need to be patient. However, you're focused on ketamine. Ketamine is available now.
You bet.
So why is this important for people to understand this based off of this?
Well, it's about reality. I mean, the reality is we have a treatment that is FDA approved, at least one of the formulations is legal, and we have, in fact, now clinical practice guidelines to implement it, and it's reimbursed in different jurisdictions. So my view is that we have depression as a public scourge now. This is a public health problem now, not 5 years from now, now. And we need treatments now. Now, that's why...
Do we know the percentage of what the world's depressed right now?
Absolutely. The rates are well published by the World Health Organization. Around the world, north of 400 million people are currently depressed.
Yeah.
Here in the United States and Canada and most OECD nations, about 1 in 5 people will experience depression, and the COVID-19's only added a tailwind to that.
Yeah.
Now, the other part about that is that the people who have depression can't get access to these treatments. That's why I keep pounding this point of access. So I think, in fact, that...
Isn't that crazy?
It's absolutely crazy. It's unacceptable. and it is modifiable. So we strongly believe you focus on what is available now. We're looking at derivatives of ketamine as next step treatments. That doesn't mean that you can't walk and chew gum at the same time. We're interested in psilocybin. In fact, we are just starting in Canada the first Health Canada approved multi-dose study for psilocybin and depression. And we built a Braxia Academy around that. We've trained therapists around that. We're going to be looking at how to, refine best practices, look what the data are on efficacy and safety. So we are absolutely looking at that. But in the near term, we really want to, in fact, focus on what's reimbursable, what's available, what's legal, and what's effective. And ketamine here in the United States has also had its indication expanded to include for suicidality. So this is clearly the opportunity. It has been a transformative medicine for psychiatry, and we want to make sure we exploit all the opportunities around this medicine called ketamine, along with looking at other opportunities.
Wealth of knowledge. Appreciate you joining me here today.
Chad, I will join you anytime and so forth. You call me up. I gave you my cell phone number. I'm going to join you down here.
All right, good stuff.
Good to be with you.
Good to you as well, all right?
Absolutely.